In this lesson, we are going to learn how to factor by using the AC method. Remember, the AC method is when you are factoring a three-term polynomial. So we have 1, 2, 3 terms, so we use the AC method. So to start off on our AC method, the first thing I'm going to do is identify my A, my B, and my C. So we're going to use the formula ax squared plus bx plus c, where a is the number in front of your x squared, so in this case it's an understood 1. B is the number in front of x, in this case we have an 8. And c is the constant, the number by itself at the far right, which in this case is 15. Now I'm going to draw what I like to call the flying X. So it's just a really big X with two little wings. On top of your X, you put the variable you are working with in the beginning here, and then you always put its leading coefficient on top as well. Well, here we have an understood 1 in front of those x's, so we don't have to really write the 1's. Up top, you put your A times C. So A is 1, C is 15. So 1 times 15 is 15. And then you put the letter we didn't use, which is our B, down at the bottom, which is 8. So we want to find out what multiplies to give you that 15 and adds to give you that 8. So I'm going to write out the factors of 15. And by factors, those are what multiply to give you 15. So 1 is always a factor. 1 times 15 is 15. And then I know 3 and 5 are factors. So you have to look and say which pair of numbers will add to give me an 8. The answer is 3 and 5. So I'm going to put those under my wings. It does not matter which one you put first. Now I'm going to check and make sure I'm doing everything correct so far. So do these two numbers, 3 times 5, do they multiply to give you 15? Yes. Does 3 plus 5 give you 8 when you add them? Yes. So we've done everything right so far. So now I'm going to read these from top to bottom to get my two binomials. So this is understood to be a positive 3 and this is a positive 5. We just normally don't write the plus sign. So I'm going to read this from top to bottom without worrying about that division sign. So that's x plus 3 and then x plus 5. And we are finished. Remember, factoring is when you break something up to be something times something else. And there is a way to check and make sure that you actually did this problem correctly by distributing this out. So multiplying x times everything in this set of parentheses and 3 times everything in this set of parentheses. So x times x is x squared. X times 5 is 5x. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times 5 is 15. So the 3 times the 5 is why we had to find what multiplied to give us that 15. And then look what happens. We have a 5x plus 3x. That's why we had to find out what added to give us 8. So we know the answer we got of x plus 3 times x plus 5 was, plus 5 was correct. All right, so number 2. I'm going to identify my A, my B, and my C first. A is 1, B is -3, C is -10. So I draw my flying X, and my variable and the leading coefficient go up top. Remember, since it's just an understood 1, you don't have to really write it because it's understood. A times C goes up top, so A times C is 1 times -10, so that's -10. B is -3. So we want to find out what multiplies to give us that -10 and adds to give us that -3. Well, if I have to multiply two numbers to get a negative, I know one has to be positive and one has to be negative. Because if they were both positive or both negative, I would get a positive 10. So my factors are 1 and 10, and 2 and 5. So the factors I'm going to use are 2 and 5, and I know my 5 has to be negative to get a -3. Okay, just remember, your highest number is going to get whatever sign your B is. So if your B is a negative, your highest number is a negative. If this would have been a +3, then your 5 would have been the positive and the 2 would have been negative. Okay, so that gives us a 2 here, -5 here. It's understood to be a positive for that 2. So our answer is y plus 2 and y minus 5. Remember, you can check your answer by distributing just like we did in problem 1. Okay, number 3. I'm going to identify my A, B, and C. A is 1, B is 2, C is -35. So now I draw my flying X, my A and the coefficient go up there, A times C goes up top, and my B goes on the bottom. So now I want to find out what multiplies to give me -35 and adds to give me that 2. So I'm going to write out the factors of that -35. I know one of my numbers has to be positive and one has to be negative. So 1 and 35, and then 5 and 7. So 5 and 7 are going to be the two numbers I use. And then my 7 is my bigger number, so it has to take the sign of the B. So my 7's the positive, so that means the 5 is the negative. So remember that checkpoint I talked about on number 1. Check and see if you're doing this right. Is -5 times 7 -35? Yes. Is -5 plus 7 +2? Yes. So you're doing everything great so far. That's an understood +7. So my answer is A minus 5 times A plus 7. And in case you're wondering, yes, the parentheses do matter, so make sure you do put your parentheses in there. Now let's say you did the problem before I did it, and you got A plus 7 first and then A minus 5 next. Well, that would still be a correct answer. I would accept that with no problem, because 2 times 3 gives us 6, and 3 times 2 gives us 6. Doesn't matter which order you multiply them, that's our commutative property. We can multiply them in whatever order, and we're still going to get that same product. Moving on to number 4. So the first thing I'm going to do is identify my A, B, and C. A is that number in front of the B squared, so A is 1. B is the number in front of this B, so it's -14. C is the number by itself, so it's a +24. Now you draw your X. Your B's go up top. A times C is 24. That goes up here. B is -14, and that goes down here. So I want to find out what multiplies to give me 24 and adds to give me negative 14. Well, I know my only two options would be both of them being positive or both of them being negative. But if I have to add them, and the reason is because a positive and a positive, when you multiply them together, it gives you a positive 24, and negative multiplied by a negative gives you a positive 24. They have to have the same signs in order to give you that positive. But since I have to add them to get a negative number, then I can't have two positives, because two positives, when you add them together, it doesn't matter, you're still going to get a positive answer. So I know both of my signs are going to be negative. Let's look and see what we have. So which one of these will add to give me negative 14? 2 and 12. The 2 is negative and the 12 is negative. Do your check. Does negative 2 times negative 12 give you positive 24? Yes. Does negative 2 plus negative 12 give you negative 14? Yes. So now you write your answer. B minus 2 times B minus 12. Now, moving on to number 5, I'm going to identify my A, B, and C. A is 1, B is 12, C is 36. So my X's go up top. A times C, oops, y'all can't see that. A times C, 1 times 36 is 36, and then B is 12. So I want to find out what multiplies to give me 36 and adds to give me 12. So 1 times 36, 2 times 18, and I'm writing out the factors. So what multiplies to give me 36? So the ones that'll add to give me 12 are going to be 6 and 6. They're both positive. So my answer is X plus 6, X plus 6. Now number 6 is a little tricky. I threw that one in there just to give you a little bit of a challenge. So I've got an A, B, and C. They're still the same. A is 1, B is 4, C is 3. My X's go up top. A times C is 3, B is 4. So I want to find out what multiplies to give us 3 and adds to give us 4. Well, my factors of 3 are 1 times 3. Those do add to give you a 4. But we have to think about these y's here. Well, if x times x, because you know that whatever is in the top of your fraction here is going to go in the front of your parentheses. So if the front of my parentheses is x times x is going to give me the front of my trinomial, which is x squared, if I need y's to be at the end of my trinomial, then I'm going to put them in the bottom of my fraction. So that gives me x plus y. You can write 1y if you want. And then x plus 3y. And if you multiplied this out, you would end up getting exactly what you started with, which was right here. Number 7. This is where I'm going to throw you the curveball. Notice on number 7, number 8 as well, 9 and 10 are going to be the same. You have A is no longer 1. We are used to them giving us an A value that is a 1. This time, they're giving us a more challenging problem. So there are two things that we need to be aware when we have a leading coefficient other than 1. So on top of my wings, y'all are used to putting just that variable. But remember, on those first two problems, I warned you that it actually needs to be your leading coefficient and the variable. So that 2 has to go up there as well. Before, when we did this, so let's like take number 4 for example, we had an understood 1 for our leading coefficient. These b's have an understood 1, so I didn't really have to write the 1 there. But since our leading coefficient is no longer an understood 1, we do have to write it there. So up top goes my a times c. So 2 times 3 is 6. My b is 5. So that 5 goes down here. So I need to find out what multiplies to give me 6 and adds to give me 5. That'll be 2 and 3. And let's check. Does 2 times 3 give you 6? Yes. Does 2 plus 3 give you 5? Yes. So we are on the right track. The only other thing we have to do before we can write our answer is we have to simplify our fractions. So these 2's will simplify. The number that goes into both of them, the greatest common factor, is 2. So 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 2 once. And this 2 and 3, they don't simplify at all. So I'm not gonna simplify them. So I'm left with x plus 1, because that 2 became a 1 down here, and 2x plus 3. Now let's try number 8. Identify my a, b, and c. A is 3, b is -5, c is -12. So my 3a goes up top. Remember, it's always the variable you're using and whatever your leading coefficient is. A times c. So 3 times -12 is -36. And then your b is a -5. So I want to find out what multiplies to give me a -36 and adds to give me -5. Well, I know one number is positive, one number is negative. I'm writing the factors. So the two numbers that will give me a -5 would be 4 and 9. And the 9 will be our negative number. So I have a +4 and a -9. So before I can write my answer, I'm going to need to simplify those fractions. So 3 and 9 simplify to be a 1 and a 3, because 3 goes into 3 one time, 3 goes into 9 3 times, and that 3 over 4 doesn't simplify. So we're left with 3a plus 4, and then a minus 3. Number 9, identify your a, b, and c. A is 7, b is -19, c is -6. So I'm going to draw my x. Our 7k goes up top. A times c is -42. Our b is -19. So I want to find out what multiplies to give me -42 and adds to give me -19. Well, to get a -42, one number has to be positive, one number has to be negative. 1 and 42, 2 and 21, 3 and 14, 6 and 7. So the numbers that would give me a -19 would be 2 and 21, but 21 would be a negative. So I have a +2 and a -21. So before I move on, I'm going to need to simplify my fractions. That 7 and 2 won't simplify, but this 7 and -21 will. 7 goes into both of those. So 7 goes into 7 once. 7 goes into -21, that -3 times. So that's 7k plus 2, and then k minus 3. And again, if you had the k minus 3 first and then the 7k plus 2 after, then that's fine. It doesn't matter the order. Number 10, identify your A, B, and C. A is 14, B is -9, and C is 1. So I'm going to draw my flying X. Up top I'm going to have 14k. A times C is 14. B is -9. So I need to find out what multiplies to give us 14 and adds to give us -9. Well, my signs are both going to have to be negative. So it's a -2 and a -7. And now I simplify those fractions. So 14 and 2 have a common number of 2, a common factor. So 2 goes into 14 7 times, 2 goes into 2 once. And then between 14 and 7, they have a common factor of 7. 7 goes into 14 2 times, 7 goes into 7 once. So my answer is 7k minus 1, and then 2k minus 1. So when we look at number 11, we have to go back to that chart that I showed you at the very beginning of factoring, which is how do I know when to do what? So we know we use the AC method when we have 3 terms, but there is a step before that we need to be conscious of. Step 1 is always to take out the greatest common factor, which we learned in that lesson is what each term has in common. So when I look at number 11, I notice there's a greatest common factor of 2. So I pull out a 2. When I do that, I divide each of these terms by that greatest common factor. And then once I divide those terms, I put that inside of these parentheses. So I get x squared minus 7x plus 6. Because these 2's cancel, leaving you with x squared. 14 divided by 2 is 7. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So now we do our AC method of what is on the inside of the set of parentheses. So I always have an answer space ready for you guys whenever you take a quiz, a test, homework, anything. So go ahead and write that 2 in your answer space, because we know that's got to be a part of our answer. Now you identify your A, B, and C. A is an understood 1, B is a -7, C is a +6. So your X's go up top. A times C goes up top, which would be 6. Your B goes on bottom, which is a -7. So I need to find out what multiplies to give me a +6 and adds to give me a -7. Well, the only 2 possibilities would be if I had either 2 positives or 2 negatives, because you have to have the same signs in order to multiply to get a positive number. If we need them to add to get a negative, then the only choice we have is to have both of them negative. So which pair, when both are negative, will give me a -7? The answer is 1 and 6. So -1, -6. So my final answer will be 2, then x minus 1 times x minus 6. So number 12. Greatest common factor here is 3. That's the number that goes into every term. So I divide each term by 3. I'm left with 2x squared minus 5x minus 7. 6 divided by 3 is 2, so I have a 2x squared. 15 divided by 3 is 5. That's how the 5x. It's a negative. And then negative 21 divided by negative 3, or positive 3 is a negative 7. So now you identify your A, B, and C. A is 2, B is negative 5, C is negative 7. On top of your wings, you get the 2x. In this top compartment here, you get A times C, which is 2 times negative 7, which is negative 14. And then B, which is negative 5. So you need to find out what multiplies to give you negative 14 and adds to give you negative 5. So we know we have to have one number a positive and one number a negative in order to get a negative 14. So 2 and 7 are going to be my choices, and the 7 is going to be negative. That's how we're going to get a negative 5 for our answer. So I have a positive 2 and negative 7. And remember, before you write your answer, you're going to have to simplify. So those 2's cancel out, giving you just a 1. So my final answer, don't forget about this 3 here, is 3, and then x plus 1, and then 2x minus 7. All right, I hope that this lesson on the AC method has been beneficial to you. I wish you the best of luck.